will be joined. Today I am joined by two special guests, Miss Hannah and her husband Titus Carey. They have a very special story that they want to share today. I know these individuals from a church that we all went together at Encounter Church, and she has a miraculous, or they both have a miraculous story that they want to share today about overcoming fear and facing something that you think is impossible, but God can make it possible. So I'm going to start out, I'm going to fast forward their story just a little bit. They were married 3 years ago, and they wanted to start a family early. So they started they started their journey to that family, and they kind of hit some roadblocks, I'd say, a little bit. So that's kind of where we're going to pick up the story today. Hannah, when y'all first got together, of course y'all said that you wanted to start a family, but you kind of realized up front that there were some issues going on. So explain a little bit about what the doctors were kind of telling you at the very beginning when you first started to get ready to have that family.
So we had been trying for a year when I went to the doctor, and at that time they did an ultrasound to kind of see if there was anything there going on, and they found a 10-centimeter cyst. So I had surgery in July in hopes that would fix the problem of infertility. So a few more months rocked on, I still wasn't getting pregnant. So I had an HSG done, which is where they put dye through your fallopian tubes. And through that, they found that both of my tubes were completely blocked due to endometriosis. And that day, they told me that I would not get pregnant naturally, that IVF would be my only option to get pregnant.
How did that make you feel?
Oh, I was distraught. I mean, I was back there by myself that day. Nobody could go with me, and I just remember being just very discouraged. And I remember the doctor telling me then, she said, "There's so many options though." And I just remember thinking the money factor of IVF, and it may or may not happen for us.
Mm-hmm. And so when you got home and you tried to explain to Titus what was going on, what was some of Titus's reactions in those moments?
I mean, for me, it was just, the questions of why, why, like she said, we just, it was one of our dreams, our biggest blessing is to have a family. I feel like, every man, every woman feels that way, that, you just, everybody wants a family. And it was just, like I said, the questions of why we couldn't have a family when we wanted to give, to our best abilities, give a kid a good life, and why we couldn't, and the reason why other people could, when it seems that they really don't even care for the kids much. So I don't know. It was a stressful time and a seasons of whys, I guess.
Yeah. So during that time, did you guys kind of lose heart? Did you give up, or did you keep trying, or what was your thought process during that time? Was it just I don't know. It would be hard. It's hard for somebody who's had children. I've had children. And it's hard for people who do have children naturally to understand what it is for somebody who struggles with that. So can you express some of those emotions that were kind of going through your mind during that time?
I mean, it was a time of lots of emotions. I feel like we did continue to try, even though we didn't know. We began, we reached out to, I know Encounter was a big part. They prayed for us. Our church family also did. Some of our friends did. We were covered in prayer during that season of life. And I feel like that's what really got us through that time of life. And just through all those emotions that we were feeling.
So did you continue to have health issues that made you go back to the doctor? Or were you still having the cyst? And
so after I had the HSG done, that was in October. About a month later, I began experiencing some pain, and I went back to the doctor for that, and it was found that I had another cyst that had formed on the same ovary. It was already 4 centimeters in a 4-month time span. So after that was found, and we knew that IVF was our only option, my doctor kind of got us on a speed track to see the fertility doctor, and that was in December that we ended up seeing him. But there's kind of that 3-month time period from the HSG to when we saw him. I was like, I just kind of wanted to take a break from everything. I didn't really want to do anything yet. I wanted to give it a little more time just to see if anything would happen. Because I mean, I did feel like that power of prayer could definitely do something. But 3 months rocked on, we ended up deciding to go ahead with doing our consult with the fertility doctor. And so that was at the beginning of December, and he kind of just confirmed the same thing that we had been told, that we would have to go through IVF, and the plan was I would have surgery in January to remove that cyst, and then we would start IVF in March.
Okay. Can you tell the people a little bit about what IVF entails? Like what is that procedure for those who don't know?
Well, I don't know a whole lot because I didn't actually have to do it, but I know that it's lots of injections. They basically insert the embryo. They have to, like, scientifically in a lab, make an embryo, and it's inserted. And I mean, I know lots of appointments and lots of injections from what I understand.
And a huge financial burden,
yes.
I'm sure, as well.
Do you know about what price range it fell in?
So they had different plans for it. So there was one where you could have, like, they would give you your money back if you didn't get pregnant, but it was all these stipulations that you had to follow under to meet that criteria. But for that one, it was like looking at $30,000 to $40,000.
Okay, and there's no guarantee in any of this. It's just okay. So in the meantime, when the doctors tell you, okay, you're not going to be able to have this naturally, were you taking any kind of supplements or any type of anything to help with fertilization, or were you just doing it the natural way?
No, we were just doing it the natural way. Like with my problem with the tubes being blocked, there was really nothing that would help that. So we didn't. So
in December, when you went back to the doctor, I was at church during that time, and they actually told you that your fallopian tubes, like, faced out or were clubbed?
They said that, yes, clubbed. They said that it was basically like if you had a baseball glove and you threw the ball, it's like the glove is closed, so it just would, it's not going to catch it. So, yes, that's kind of how they explained what my tubes looked like. Okay,
so this was early December, correct? So somewhere around, I was at church during that time, and I know there was some prophecy spoken over you at that time. Would you like to share that a little bit with people?
So we were told that there would be a baby and that it would be a Christmas gift.
Okay, so what brought about what occurred on Christmas Day?
Well, we were going on a trip to Callaway Gardens around that time. I actually took a test the Friday before we left. I can't remember which day that was, but it was a few days before Christmas. I took a test, and of course it was negative. I don't even know that I told him about it. But we went on our trip. I actually ended up with the flu, so we came back a little early. But I know with that prophecy, Mom had said, which she of course didn't know I'd just taken the test either. She said, well, take one on Christmas Day. And I was like, okay, I mean, it's going to be negative. Like, I just took one, but okay, I'll take one. So Christmas morning, I took a test, and it was the faintest line. I remember telling him that, well, there's a line, but it's really faint. And I called Mom and told her, I said, don't get too excited because it's really faint, but there's a line. It's more than I've seen. So we came over here for Christmas morning after that, and everything's closed on Christmas Day. So Walgreens was open though. So after we left here, we went to Walgreens and we got a test that says pregnant or not pregnant. And so I took that one and it said pregnant.
Oh. So what were your emotions during that time? Did you believe it, or did you think, well, maybe this is a false positive after all the negative you'd heard, or where were your emotions at in that moment?
Well, I cried after I saw it. I feel like it definitely did take me a long time to process that because of what I had been told for so long. It was really hard for me to grasp that I could potentially actually be pregnant.
Yeah. So what were you thinking at the time? Because as a dad, I know you're you want to experience all that joy, but I'm sure there was some hesitation in all of it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely didn't really believe it. Maybe more so on the second test that we got when we seen it. I believed a little more, but at the beginning, I definitely didn't really. Like she said, it took a long time to process, but for me, I just didn't really have much faith in it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's understandable, of course, after everything that y'all had been through. So when you called your doctor and told him, what they say?
So I called her medical assistant and I left a voicemail and I said, I know you're not going to believe me, but I have some news, so just call me back whenever you can. And she did. And I, of course, told her, I said, I just took a test and it was positive. And she was like, okay, well, and you could tell, no, you're not.
Yeah.
That's what they were really thinking. But they said, well, we're going to get you in for blood work. My doctor called me and she was like, well, you had a positive test. That's great. She was like, but the concern is with you having so many issues with your tubes that it's very likely it could be a tubal pregnancy. So don't get too excited about it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, that little bit of joy and that hope that we had, I felt like it got kind of squashed by just the negativity that we constantly would hear through things like that.
Yeah. So you get to the doctor does the test. What comes next?
So I had blood work done. They would draw my blood and I would come back 2 days later. And we did that for a couple weeks because I was only 4 weeks along whenever I got that first test. So it was too early to get an ultrasound and really see anything. But they did that for several weeks and they said, what we want to happen is the numbers to go up. If they don't, then that's typically a sign of a tubal pregnancy. We want them to double every so many days. And I remember looking at the results that first time and they went up. So then I went back the next week and they had gone up more than just double. So she was like, that's a good time, but we will not be able to confirm for sure until we get you in for an ultrasound that it is in fact in your uterus and it's not in your tubes.
Okay. So you still have that, ooh, I'm excited, but they're leading up to something exciting, but they're not really letting you go all in for it. So when you get ready, like the night before you're going to get those tests done, you know that this is going to be the one that's really going to be what's going through your mind. What are some of the things that y'all are thinking as you get ready for that ultrasound?
I had worry, I had concern, I was excited. I feel like I was all over the place really. But I was definitely hopeful that God did perform a miracle and that there could be a baby.
Yeah. And what were you thinking, Titus?
Once we started getting the blood test, like I said, I didn't have a lot of faith, in just the pregnancy tests you get from Walgreens or Dollar General, wherever you can get them from. I didn't have much, a lot of faith in that. But once we started getting the blood test, my doubt went away pretty fast because, like you said, there was prophecy spoke, and it wasn't, they were spoke months ahead of time before anything, had happened at all. So to have doubt was kind of foolish in the first place. But not definitely once we started getting the blood test, that's when my doubt started to leave, and just, like you said, we was covered in prayer, and you just knew God had it,
Yeah. So when you went for the ultrasound, what did the doctor say?
So that ultrasound, the baby was in my uterus, and I remember we got the ultrasound, and there were 2 sacs that day, and I said, so what is this other circle here? And they said, well, potentially it's twins. And I was like, oh,
So you were like, wait a minute now.
Mm-hmm.
So they didn't tell you that day it was a twin. They just said there's a possibility of it, correct?
Because they said that sometimes they like self-absorb.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you came home with, what'd you tell mom and dad? What did they think?
Well, we were all very excited for sure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So how long was it before they actually said, yes, it is a second child?
So we had to go back that next week. That was at 6 weeks. At 7 weeks, we went back because it was too soon to hear the heartbeat. And at that 7 week, they heard the 2 heartbeats. So it was even more so like, okay, there's 2 babies.
Yeah, and you were getting really excited. I remember this time, but they also started giving you some more things to kind of make you start worrying. And I remember we were praying for you, like, don't let the doctors bring in the doubt. And I know there were some more issues. So what were the doctors warning you of then?
So the next thing that we ran into, they told us that it was pretty early, so that there could be a dividing membrane between the 2 babies, but that it could potentially be what they call mono twins. But that they were hopeful there was a dividing membrane. But more weeks went by, we found out there was not one. So we were having a very high risk pregnancy, only 0.1% of all pregnancy in the world. And then 1% of twins is what is mono. So I had to start going to a high risk doctor from there, along with my regular OBGYN, to kind of keep a check on how things were going.
But everything looked good as far as the doctors were saying until they started talking about the cord getting wrapped around and things like that started coming in the picture later on in the pregnancy, correct?
So I remember the first appointment I had with the high risk doctor, he was saying, if you can make it to 20 weeks, I'll feel better. And they always talked about viability, which I hated that word. But I remember he said the 20 weeks, and mom was with me at that appointment, and she said, so 20 weeks, you're pretty safe? And I remember him saying, oh no, you could come back in 2 weeks and then be gone.
Oh, wow.
So that was a lot for me to take in when he said that. I broke down majorly that day.
Mm-hmm.
And I know everybody was worried that was kind of going to put, just kind of take away from the joy of the pregnancy, like just the worry of, is something going to happen in them the whole pregnancy? Because the risk of mono twins is that they are sharing, they're in the same sac, and they have the same placenta. So both babies are right in there together, and the cords can get wrapped around their necks or get knotted, and it can cut off like blood supply and oxygen and kill one of them or both of them.
So when all this was going on, I know you were a teacher. Did you have to take leave from work and do those things, or were there special things that you had to do to prevent the babies from, I don't know, I've never had that situation. Were there exercises or things that went on to help and aid in those things?
No, there really wasn't. It was just basically we would go to appointments every week, like twice a week I would go. And they would just like check and make sure. Another concern was that one baby would get more nutrients than the other one. So they were like checking to make sure, like checking different sizes of things for the baby, checking their heart, checking the cords to make sure blood flow was still going through them. Just things like that. So it was basically just, a waiting game up until they did want me to go into inpatient monitoring in the hospital. Around 22 weeks is what they wanted me to do, which would have been the beginning of May. And being into school, I don't finish until the end of May. So I remember I asked him, I said, so is there any way I can just wait till 26 weeks? I was like, just let me finish the school year out and then I'll go. I was like, but there's no way I can go at 22 weeks right now. So at 26 weeks, I went into the hospital for inpatient monitoring.
And how difficult was that for you?
It was extremely difficult. Mentally, I don't think I was mentally prepared for what that entailed for me. because you can say, oh, you're going to the hospital for however many weeks it's going to be. But until I got there, I mean, I walked in, I felt perfectly fine. I was pregnant and I was fine. But it was just, they wanted to keep a check on the babies and make sure their heart rates weren't get spiking or anything. When I first got there, they basically had me on bed rest, except I could get up to go to the bathroom or to take a shower. So it was like, I really felt like a prisoner in the hospital. I mean, I couldn't get up and walk. I couldn't do anything. We eventually ended up talking to the high risk doctor, and we were like, look, is there any reason why I can't walk? Like, they're not letting me. And he's like, I mean, no. And we were just worried that I was going to get so weak that, I mean, I was going to have twins soon, and then I'd be so weak that, because I haven't been moving out of the bed hardly. So they ended up letting me, first it was, they would let me take a wheelchair ride once a day. I would get to ride through the hospital. But you felt like a burden because the nurse, you know, they have 100 things to do, and the nurse had to go with you. They ended up moving me down to the labor and delivery floor, so those were the nurses working with me, and they would let me go on, like, I would either go with him at night or my mom during the day, and we would get to go on like a little walk through the hospital down to the garden, and that was my sanity for the month that I was in there being monitored.
Okay.
And going to the hospital, when we got to the hospital, you know, it brought another level of fears because, like you said, they was monitoring the girls, and the heart rate drops or it gets too high. You got nurses running in the room to check on, you know, obviously the girls. So it was just, you know, it was always something. And I mean, you get to a point where you kind of got used to it, but it was, you know, it was always nerve wracking when, you know, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning they come running in because their heart rates drop.
And then if it dropped, like, you would be on the monitor even longer. Like, ideally they want you on it 24/7, but obviously that's not really feasible for me. But there were several times throughout our hospital stay where I would call him and he'd be at work, and I'd be like, okay, they're thinking about doing a C-section because the girl's heart rates are dropping, but then they would get them back under control where it didn't end up happening. So it was just a lot of the unknown and that type of thing while I was there.
So for you, you're in the hospital and you're out working. So your point of view of things must have been completely different than hers. I'm sure there were other things in the background going on in Deer life outside of what this major thing was that was going on. So how are y'all dealing with all of everything else? Did you have a big support group?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely, I mean, family, you know, is a big support group to us, definitely. But it just, I don't know, only way I can describe it is life revolved around the hospital back then. Like, it's kind of hard to describe. I mean, her parents, Kim and Tony, has always been a big help, you know, to us and to the girls. So, you know, because her mom would go stay with her, you know, in the day, and I would come at night. But like I said, I mean, only way I can describe it is just life at the hospital. And it was a lot of, you know, I mean, that's.
But isn't it, like, my situation is completely different than theirs. I had a child that had a brain tumor, and we were in the hospital a lot. But for me, when I look back on it, I was like, that had to be God that saved that part of it. Because there were things going on in the background that if God hadn't been involved in it, I would have been like, oh Lord, everything would have come apart.
Absolutely.
We had chicken houses at the time, and there just happened to be somebody there to help us with the chicken houses at the time. I'm like, I mean, literally, Lord, if you hadn't provided something like that. So God's always playing in the background of everything. So the big day comes. Did they tell you what day it was going to be, or was this something that was brought on by your health? Or
so the original plan was to get me to. They weren't going to let me go past 34 weeks. The one doctor had said 32, one had said 34. So they ended up with the girls having the D cells and things that had kind of happened. They were saying 32 weeks. So that was our plan. But at 30 weeks, the girls started having like significant heart D cells that they were concerned about. So it was actually 29 weeks and 6 days. That was the day.
Okay.
June 26th.
So the day comes around, doctors come in, flurry of everything. What are you guys thinking? What's going through your mind?
I had to call you. You weren't there yet. You were working, so you had to get everything, all your stuff packed and ready to go. I mean, it really wasn't like a really hectic day. My concern was that it was going to end up being an emergency C-section, which then he wasn't going to be able to be in there, and I would be under anesthesia and wouldn't remember anything. So I was just thankful that it was like actually a planned one and that he had time to get there and all of that. No, I don't know how you felt about it.
Yeah, I mean, when the day came, they did call me, so of course I wasn't in a rush, and you know, I'm not saying, you know, recommending it to anybody else, but I might have set records on the way to Athens that day.
Yeah.
My dad had left Bowman 20 minutes before I did. I got the call, and obviously when I got the call, I went, and my dad called me and said, "I know that wasn't you to come past me." I said, "Yeah, it was definitely me to come past me." So I don't know, but you know, with everything happened, moved so fast then too. It's just it's really hard to, you know. I mean, for me, you know, what I remember that day is, you know, really more the NICU more than anything else, because you know, I mean, it was just, you know, having to see your kid, you know, basically having to, you know, have help to breathe, and like you said, still hooked up on all these machines and got everything stick to them. That's kind of my memory of their birth, because you know, the actual birth just happened so fast.
Yeah. So you do get to see them though during the birth, correct? Do they do show them to you, or do they have to rush them off?
For me, that was, I knew that was going to be the case. So I mean, I was prepared for it, but I feel like it still was difficult as a mom, because I feel like you just have this picture of your birth that they just lay the baby on you, and but that wasn't the case for us. They did this. I had a C-section, of course, and I mean, they had the curtain up, so they like showed me like a peep of their head above the curtain before they took them immediately. And one of them actually had, which this could happen to any baby, but one of them had the cord wrapped around 2 times around her neck, and the other one had it wrapped around her neck 3 times. So,
oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I watched them like unravel.
Wow.
So that was
But yeah, they immediately took them to the NICU, and they rolled them by me. Like, I couldn't tell anything about them though, because I mean, they were in the big box, all enclosed, and they just rolled them down to the NICU. And I mean, I didn't see them until like 9 o'clock that night, and they were born around a little before 3 o'clock. So it was, I mean, not what I envisioned at all for my first birth.
Of course. But once you get to see them.
oh,
Absolutely.
Oh man. That's all she wrote for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing like seeing that baby for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And we're proud to report they are 7 months old.
7 months old.
Okay, and you did have issues there in NICU. What were some of the things that y'all had to kind of go up and down? Y'all had a rocky road there for a little while, didn't you?
Mm-hmm. So the girls ended up being in the NICU. Brindley was in there for 80 days. Baylor was in there 82 days. Shortly after they were in there, they do like routine heart scans and things like that, and we were told that Brindley had failed 2 of the heart tests, so they had to do an echocardiogram to kind of rule out that it was nothing major. So of course we got all our prayer warriors praying then, and to kind of get us through that, and it came back and they said that it was perfect, that last one. So we got through that. And then Baylor, they do brain scans as well. So they told us Brindley's was fine. And I really wasn't, they told me they were doing it, but I was like, oh, it'll be fine. Like, I wasn't really thinking anything about it. And they told us that I knew something was going to be wrong, because the nurse usually would tell me the information when I got there. But that day she was like, we asked about it, and she said, oh, the nurse practitioner is going to come tell you about it. And I was like, okay, something's wrong, because she doesn't ever say that. So they came over and they said that she had a grade 2 to 3 brain bleed. And a 1 to 2, like, it ain't not like real concerning, but once it gets to a 3 and 4, that's when the concern comes in. And I remember him coming in that day, and he like asked me, he said, well, how did it go? And I was like, I couldn't even talk, because I was just gonna break into tears. And I was like, hers wasn't good. So I said, she's supposed to come talk to you. So they came and kind of explained everything to him. Once again, we got everybody praying again. And the next scan they did was at 1 month. And we kind of asked her, like, well, what's best case scenario for this? Mm-hmm. And they said, well, they can, like, resolve on their own. They're like, she could have cerebral palsy, mild cerebral palsy. She could have, they're like, she may just be left-handed. We just don't know until further time passes how it will affect her. But by that 1 month scan, her brain bleed had, like, self-resolved.
Wow.
And she is 7 months old, and they've been going to PT and OT, and she has been hitting all her milestones like she should. Oh. And the last thing was Brindley. They told us one day that she had something called NEC, which is a severe gut infection. Mm. And that, like, it can result in death if it's not treated within 24 to 48 hours. Wow. So they were really on top of that. They took her off of all feeds by mouth. And she had just like an IV that she was getting nutrients and fluids and things through. And that lasted for about a week, which it was hard seeing her, we couldn't hold her a whole lot during that time and all of that. But I mean, she overcame that. Of course, we had people praying during that. So I mean, it's just like we have seen God's hand through just the entire process. I mean, he's how we've gotten through all of it. And then, like I said, 80 and 82 days in the NICU. It was a long journey. Baylor would struggle to eat. She had a feeding tube, which they both did to begin with. And then Brindley, she would have like heart decels where she would hold her breath, and that automatically would add so many days on their NICU stay. But we overcame all that, and they are home and doing great.
So during this process, you also kind of gave your story online, and this kind of built upon something for other ladies out there that have gone through something similar to this. So I know you gave some great advice to people out there. If there's somebody out there that's kind of going through what you guys went through at the very beginning and kind of struggling with that infertility, what's some good advice that you could give them as far as, just holding on and trusting in the Lord and things like that? What are some things that really helped you?
I would just say, just keep that faith, and God still does miracles. He can and still does do them. Lean in on your church family, and just have all those people praying. I feel like that's what really got us through it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I so enjoyed your story. And the babies are here, but they're so quietly put away. So I would invite them in here, but they're probably asleep by now, but they are precious. And thank you guys so much for your story. And I am so glad to see that God does miracles no matter where your story starts. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that he can't do something miraculous. And you guys got double the blessing. So thank you again for joining us for There Will Be Joy, and we will see you next time.